Hi, welcome to the Gamesplainer. I'm Jeff the Gamesplainer, and today I'm Gamesplaining November. So it's time for the top 10 of November. What have I been playing? What have I been up to? I'm so glad you asked. Let's get straight into it. My number 10 game for November is A Fistful of Meeples. On playing this one, I fear that it plays too easily, too quickly. Potentially there's something with the balance on this one that it turns over and goes through really fast. I've played it a couple of times over the last month or so, and I've found that there are three ways that the game can finish. It always finishes the same way, which is people have just gathered enough gold in. There's something on that balance that's just it feels like I haven't had that many turns, but the game's finished already. I'm not 100% sure what it is, but this is it. I think there's the essence of a really good game on it, but it hasn't quite been balanced out right. Let's move on. My number 9 game for November is Deep Sea Adventure. This is a game that comes out relatively often. It sits in my bag simply because it's so small. It takes up so little space that it can just fit in to those tiny little gaps. And if you're sitting waiting for someone else to turn up, it's a really quick, really good game to pull out and throw onto the table. I have played it quite often, so I found that I'm doing the same things, and that's giving me a similar result. So there's no real challenge in it for me anymore. But I still think it's a solid game. It's a worthwhile game to get to the table and just kind of have in your collection, simply because it is so small, it can just be pulled out. Let's keep moving. My number 8 game for November is Triavision. Triavision is a game that I don't actually own. It was brought along to a game night by a friend, and he pulled it out really quickly, really early, simply because we're waiting for some people. And the whole concept of it is that you move one of the colored blocks to create a shape that is potentially on the card. So there's like 10 cards around the board. And if you can move one block to create the shape or pattern on one of those cards, then you will gain the card. And it's really a matter of whoever's the fastest gets it. So you want to be really quick at manipulating a board to get the right shapes or the right colors in the right pattern. It's quite a fun little game. I fear that there's a element of the speed that would actually get in the way of some people enjoying the game, simply because some people's minds don't work quickly. If your mind, however, does work quickly, this is probably a game for you if you can find it. My number 7 game for November is Tricky Tides. Now, Tricky Tides is delivered on the rulebook as this is the main rules, and then there's these extra little things that can be added in. I think they should just add those little things in. It makes the game better. There's no real weight in the understanding of it. The issue I do have with this game is it feels like it's two different games that are kind of crunching together and trying to be one, but not quite getting onto it. I did enjoy playing the game the couple of times that I've played it, but it really does feel like there's a card management game where you're having to follow suit, and then there's a game on the table where you're going in a certain direction to pick up cubes to be able to deliver those to get the points. It hasn't quite found the thing that holds it together. But that may also be an intentional choice of the designers, and in which case they're doing something totally different to stuff that I've come across before. I'll leave it up to you to decide about that. Let's move on. My number 6 game for November is Succulent. Now, I really enjoyed Succulent. I think it's one of those just relaxed, peaceful games. In essence, what you're doing is you are taking a piece of flower bed and placing it onto the board. And whatever you cover up, you get those cuttings and those elements that you're covering, and you want to collect different numbers or different amounts of each element to be able to claim cards, which will give you points and some other bonuses. That's in essence the game. There's a little bit more to it than that, but that's in essence the game. I found it quite enjoyable, quite relaxing, enjoyable, but quite enjoyable nonetheless. I found that there's a number of games that when you're playing them, they just feel relaxed. It may be that this is one of those nature kind of games, but it may be something else. I haven't quite put my finger on it yet, but it's quite a solid little game that works really nicely. I'd like to get this one back to the table. I don't know if I will, but I'd like to get it back to the table. My number 5 game for November is Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig. Now this is a really interesting one. It hasn't been off my shelf for a little while to get to the table. I've really enjoyed playing it. I've enjoyed it every time it has come out. The issues that I've found with this one is that the scoring at the end can get a little bit tedious because there's so many different elements that each person needs to score. What I found, if you play this game, what I found is the best way to go is give a score sheet to everyone and get them all to score the castle on their left, all to score the castle on their right. Because the essence of the game is you're playing 2 castles and building them up, one left, one on the right, and whichever one is the least number of points, that's what your points are. So you really need to build them evenly or as evenly as possible so that they both have a really high score rather than one having a super huge score and the other one not having much. There's a lot of funky, I could use this one, but no, we could use that one kind of things going on with this, and there's a lot of negotiation. I really appreciate that. I really like it. This game is built based on the idea of mashing together Between Two Cities and Castles of Mad King Ludwig. Castles of Mad King Ludwig I really like. Between Two Cities, if you remember seeing my video for it, I wasn't a huge fan of. But Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig has worked really nicely. But as I say, it's got this really long scoring thing at the end, which can slow the game down and take a little bit out of it. The other issue I've got with this game is the size of the stuff on each card can be difficult for some people to read. So I've previously pulled it out and we've put it away really quickly because one of the people at the table was kind of, I can't see that. And I think that's an element just to be aware of. If you have eyesight issues, Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig may not necessarily be the game for you. But it plays to a large count. I think it plays up to 7. It's got enough thinking going on for it to be a really good game, and I really, really appreciate that one. My number 4 game for November is Cartographers. Now, Cartographers is a roll and write, but you're flipping. So flip and write, if you will. Everyone has to put the same things that are flipped over off the card onto their grid. And the way you place them is what's going to get you the extra points or the points in the end. I've played this a couple of times now. I've really enjoyed it both times I've played it. I've found that the first time I was really learning the game and there was a lot of nuance that I just didn't quite understand. On the second play, I easily got a relatively high score because I understood what I was doing. And that's playing against people who are first time at the game and they don't necessarily understand the things, the different elements. So if you are pulling out Cartographers, it's a worthwhile thing to make sure everyone knows what the 4 different scoring things are. Of course, the whole idea of the game is there are 4 different types of scoring. Each of them is going to score twice. So the first 2 will score on the first round. The next 2 the second and third one will score on the second round. The third and fourth on the third round. And the fourth and first on the last round. And so you can actually spend some time working towards getting huge points over on those last few things that are going to score, while not necessarily going after big scores on the early ones. And just finding a balance on when to do things is really a worthwhile thing to do. I really appreciate this. I'm not a hugest fan of roll and write games, but I found this one to be quite enjoyable. My number 3 game for November is Clank in Space. Now, Clank in Space and Clank are games that haven't come off my shelf for a while. It was a little bit of, how's this thing going? I've got the vague memory of it, but there's these little elements, especially with Clank in Space, there's little elements that need revision relatively regularly to kind of keep them in your head because they're so different or so vastly different to the regular Clank stuff. I really enjoyed it. I find that Clank in Space has, picture art-wise, has pictures that are drawing on pop culture space stuff, so Star Trek or Star Wars or any of the other space-ish type stuff. If you're playing with someone who doesn't know any of those TV shows, it's totally lost on them. And that doesn't matter, but there's no point in pointing it out if the person you're playing with has no idea what Star Trek is. They're wearing red shirts. It's a thing. I found that with my Clank experience, playing Clank in space, I've always won this game. Playing regular Clank, I've always lost. I'm not sure what the difference is, but I do find that Clank in space is an easier game to play. It may just be the placement of the things you're going after, but that might just be me with where my head sits. But Clank in Space is a really, really good game. Let's move on. My number 2 game for November is Viticulture. Viticulture is one of those games that does come up more often than a lot of other games. In fact, the last few games have been games that came up quite often through my playing. The games that I gravitate towards. I really like Viticulture. I don't always win Viticulture, but I really like it. The thing that I do find with this game is that it has the ability to move quickly if everyone is thinking ahead of, oh, I want to do this, this, and this. Sure, have something in your back pocket in case the spot is already taken, you can't do it. But this game of Viticulture went really, really long because people were waiting till it was their turn to then start thinking. And I think that's the case with a heck of a lot of games. You need to be thinking while it's not your turn in order to keep the game moving forward. But other than that, pushing that aside, I really enjoyed the game. I really enjoy Viticulture. I've always played with the Tuscany expansion now. It just gives that little bit of extra thinking to what we're doing at the table. But I really enjoy it. I think it's a wonderful game. The whole idea is worker placement, and you're placing your guys out within the season, so you can't move on to the next season until everyone's finished this season. And the player order is constantly changing, and there's a heck of a lot of stuff going on with the whole idea of you're trying to convert grapes into wines. But it is still possible to actually win this game without ever creating a wine. You've just got to get the right cards to enable that to happen. My number 1 game for November is Tekkenu. Now, Tekkenu is a super heavy game. It's in the same line or idea as Teotihuacan, and I believe there's another one that's just come out. I haven't got my hands on it yet, but I will. It's really heavy. It's by David Searchy, who also designed Anachrony. And I found with Anachrony and David Searchy's games, they're designed to the top level, in terms of weight. There's always little things that are going on that if you can manipulate them right, you're going to do really well. But remembering those little things is a little bit of a challenge, at least for me anyway, with, that's going to get you 3 points if you do this. Putting that on here will get you these points and this point, and watch out for that little point there. Little ideas like that. I do really appreciate Tekkenu for what it is. I actually quite enjoyed the game. I've found that getting this game to the table, and I fear similar to the other David Searchy games, is if you have players who don't know the game, which, let's be honest about it, is almost always. There'll be at least one player at the table who doesn't know the game. Getting through the explanation can take quite an amount of time. I believe my Gamesplainer went up last week, and it has 2 sections. The first part of the video is just the basics of the game. The second part is the detail of this is what each thing does, because there's 6 different areas on the board and each thing works vastly different to each other thing, but you need to be able to do this, to be able to do that, to get things in, to do that. There's so much going on with this game. It's a really fulfilling game. I really like it. I really appreciate it, but it's also really hard to get to the table. This is one of those beautiful games that uses dice, but you don't roll the dice to see what you can do. They are rolled in place, and that's how many of that number of resource or that number of thing that you can do. I really appreciate games that have a dice mechanism in them that aren't just roll the dice to move this many squares. So look, I'll leave it there. That's been my November. Let's see how December goes, see if I can get through at least 10 games or more. At least I've crossed over my 300 games for the year, so that's a thing. If you have any games that you would like to be gamesplaying, please shoot me an email to thegamesplainer@gmail.com. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter @thegamesplainer to keep up to date with the games I'm playing. Subscribe to my videos to keep up to date with the games that I'm gamesplaining. And until next time, enjoy gaming.